So here's a massive question for you. How does a nation of over 115 million people, spread across more than 7,000 islands, even begin to think about powering its future? And we're not talking about just any country. You've got one of the fastest growing economies in all of Asia, a place with huge ambitions, but, and this is a huge but, it's also a nation on the absolute front lines of climate change, getting hit by some of the most extreme weather on the planet. So the puzzle is immense. How do you fuel all that growth while also protecting your people for what is, for them, a very real existential threat? Today, we are going deep inside the complex, ambitious, and sometimes contradictory plan the Philippines has to do just that.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get a handle on the core problem they're trying to solve, what we're calling the Philippine Energy Dilemma. Then we'll look at the two big parallel paths they're taking. The first is all about today, securing energy with a solid fossil fuel foundation. The second is about tomorrow, building a completely new clean energy future through a full-on renewable revolution. After that, we'll see how they plan to tie it all together by modernizing the entire system. And finally, we'll tackle the biggest question of all. How in the world do you pay for a transformation this massive?
So, first up, let's get right to the heart of the matter, the Philippine Energy Dilemma. This really is the tightrope the country has to walk every single day. It's a high-stakes balancing act between what the economy needs and what the environment demands.
And this question is everything. It drives every single decision. Powering its future isn't just a slogan, right? It means keeping the lights on in factories, fueling a booming digital economy, running hospitals, and giving millions of families the reliable electricity they need to improve their lives. But at the same time, protecting the planet isn't some far-off idea. For the Philippines, it's about survival. It means hitting climate goals, sure, but it also means building defenses against typhoons that get stronger every year and sea levels that are literally swallowing up their coastline.
Okay, take a look at this. This chart gives us the raw, unfiltered starting point. In 2022, the energy mix is just dominated by fossil fuels. See that huge slice for oil? Over 32%, and almost all of that is imported. That means the country's economy is completely at the mercy of global price swings and conflicts happening thousands of miles away. It's the same story for most of the coal and a growing amount of natural gas. This isn't just an environmental problem, it's a massive threat to their energy security. This chart shows you exactly how big of a mountain they have to climb.
So, how do you climb a mountain that big? Well, the answer isn't a simple straight line. It's what they call a dual-path strategy. And it's incredibly pragmatic. They know you can't just flip a switch and turn off the system that's powering the country right now. That would be chaos. So you have to keep the lights on with what you've got, while at the same time, you pour a ton of resources into building a totally new, clean system right alongside it. It's like trying to rebuild a highway while rush hour traffic is still on it. This two-track approach is the key to understanding everything else they're doing.
All right, let's dig into that first track, shoring up the fossil fuel foundation. This part of the plan is all about one thing, making sure the country has the energy it needs right here, right now. So to get a handle on that import problem we just saw, the first step is to look in their own backyard. The plan is to get aggressive with upstream activities. That's just a fancy way of saying exploration and drilling for their own oil and gas. They're offering up new contracts to bring in companies with the cash and the know-how to find and develop these local reserves. The goal is simple. Make more at home so you're not so vulnerable to what happens in the rest of the world. And you can see, even here, they're keeping an eye on the future, with plans to look into things like hydrogen down the road.
And if you want to understand the scale we're talking about, just look at this number. 2.2 times trillion pesos. That is a mind-boggling amount of money. And that's just for the natural gas infrastructure. We're not talking about a few pipes here. We're talking about building an entire ecosystem from scratch. Massive terminals to bring in liquefied natural gas, new power plants, storage tanks, the whole shebang. It's a giant signal to the world that the Philippines is going all in on natural gas.
So why the massive rush on natural gas? Well, it all comes down to a ticking clock named Malampaya. For the last 20 years, this gas field has been an absolute giant for the Philippine economy, a homegrown source of energy that powers a huge part of the country. But it's running out. Fast. Projections say it could be empty as soon as 2027. This isn't some distant problem. This is an emergency, and it's forcing the country to pivot from being a producer to a massive importer of LNG, and they have to do it yesterday.
Now, to handle this emergency, you need a clear plan, right? That's what this is. The Natural Gas Development Plan is basically the government's blueprint to make it as easy and safe as possible for private companies to come in and spend billions of dollars building those LNG terminals. It's about cutting red tape and creating a stable environment for investment. It is a flat-out race against time to get this stuff built before Malampaya runs dry.
Okay, now here's where things get, well, really interesting, and for a lot of people, pretty controversial. In a world that's trying to get rid of coal, the Philippine Department of Energy is saying not so fast. They are crystal clear. Coal is an integral part of their energy plan, not just for now, but for the medium and even long term. The reason? It's pure pragmatism. They have a lot of it, it's cheap, and it provides reliable baseload power. That's the steady 24/7 electricity you need to keep the grid from collapsing.
And they're not just talking a big game, this is the actual official roadmap. And you can see, the plan isn't to slow down on coal, it's to hit the accelerator. The goal is to produce 30 million metric tons a year right now. But then they plan to find another 50 million tons of the stuff, and more than double their annual production by 2050. There's no ambiguity here. This is a long-term commitment to coal as a pillar of energy security.
And this is what that strategy looks like on the ground. These are modern, so-called supercritical coal plants. In simple terms, they run hotter and more efficiently than old-school coal plants, so they pollute a bit less. Now, let's be real, they're still pumping out a lot of carbon. But from the government's point of view, these plants are the bedrock. They provide that steady power that the whole system relies on. It's a strange kind of foundation, right? Building for a clean future on top of a coal-powered present.
Okay, so we've seen the keep the lights on part of the plan. Now, let's flip the coin and look at the really exciting, world-changing part, the all-out push for a renewable revolution. This is where the vision for a clean, sustainable, and homegrown energy future really starts to come alive.
And the goals here are, wow, they are seriously ambitious. The plan is to get renewables to 35% of all power by 2030, and then to a full 50% by 2040. Let that sink in. Going from a pretty small slice of the pie today to half of all electricity in less than 2 decades. That's not just tweaking the system. That's a declaration that they're going to fundamentally re-engineer how their entire country is powered.
So you're probably thinking, how on earth are they going to pull that off? Well, a huge piece of the answer is literally blowing in the wind right off their coasts. The Philippines is a nation of islands, and that geography has given it a world-class, almost completely untapped resource, offshore wind. They're betting big that this powerful, consistent wind can become a cornerstone of their clean energy future.
There was just one big problem holding them back. For years, the country had rules that limited foreign ownership, but building massive offshore wind farms costs billions and requires very specialized tech. So the government made a game-changing move. They changed the rules to allow 100% foreign ownership in renewable projects. And guess what? It worked. Instantly. A major Danish company jumped in, sending a signal to the entire world that the Philippines was officially open for business.
But they're definitely not putting all their eggs in the wind basket. This is a full-court press. You've got auctions to get large-scale solar and wind farms built cheap. You've got programs to get solar panels on regular people's roofs, turning consumers into producers. They're even looking at turning trash into electricity, which tackles 2 problems at once. And they're doubling down on geothermal power, something they're already one of the best in the world at.
And this stuff is already working. It's not just talk. This number, almost 3,500 megawatts, that's the amount of new, clean power they locked in from just one auction. To give you some context, that's like building several massive conventional power plants. This isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. That's real-world power that is actually going to be built. The revolution is happening right now.
Okay, so you've got these 2 engines running. Fossil fuels for today, renewables for tomorrow. But it's not enough to just make the power, you have to get it where it needs to go, reliably. And that brings us to the next massive challenge, modernizing the entire system. And that's where the grid comes in. It's the absolute backbone of this whole transition. You can build all the wind farms you want, but if your grid is old and can't handle power that comes and goes with the weather, it's all useless. That's why they have this huge, long-term plan to build a smarter, stronger grid. The goal is to turn it from a one-way street into a dynamic superhighway that can manage power coming from everywhere, from giant offshore farms to tiny rooftop panels.
Of course, the big question with renewables has always been, what happens when the sun goes down or the wind stops blowing? The answer is energy storage. We're talking about things like massive battery systems. Think of a giant rechargeable battery for the whole country. And also clever things like pumped hydro, where you use excess power to pump water up a mountain and then let it flow back down through a turbine to generate electricity when you need it. These are the missing pieces that let you have clean, reliable power 24/7. You know, there's another piece to this puzzle, and it's something we can all relate to. The best kind of energy is the energy you never even have to use. The plan puts a huge emphasis on efficiency and conservation. It's about bringing this giant national project down to the personal level, encouraging everyone to be smarter about their energy use. It makes every single citizen part of the solution. And this push for efficiency doesn't stop at the light switch. It hits the road, targeting one of the biggest energy hogs of all, transportation. I mean, if you're really serious about an energy transition, you have to completely rethink how people and things get around. And the vision here is huge. It's not just about getting more electric vehicles on the road. The goal is much bigger. To use this moment to build an entire EV industry right there in the Philippines. They want to make the batteries, assemble the cars, and eventually export them to the world, taking advantage of their own natural resources like nickel and copper. And the numbers they're aiming for are just jaw-dropping. We're talking about millions of electric cars, and even more importantly, over 8 million electric motorcycles and nearly 2 million electric tricycles. For millions of Filipinos, those are the main ways of getting around, so electrifying them is a game changer. And of course, you need a massive network of over 600,000 charging stations to power them all. This is a blueprint for a total transformation. And again, this isn't just some far-off dream. The money is already starting to flow. Private companies have already poured over 1.6 billion pesos into building out that charging network. That's a huge vote of confidence. It shows that the market believes in this vision and is willing to put real skin in the game to build the foundations for an electric future.
So, after hearing all of this, there's probably one big question on your mind. Who's going to pay for all of this? We're talking about a plan that covers everything from deep-sea oil rigs to solar panels on every roof. The price tag is astronomical. That brings us to our final, and maybe most important piece of the puzzle, the money.
Well, they've built a whole framework for it, designed to bring in those trillions of pesos. You can see it's built on these 4 pillars that perfectly reflect that dual-track strategy we've been talking about. It's about ensuring security with today's energy sources while also supporting a sustainable future. It's about using new tech and, this is the big one, creating a system that encourages a flood of private investment to do the heavy lifting.
And inside this framework is one of the most clever ideas I've seen in a while, called the Energy Transition Mechanism, or ETM. It's designed to solve a really tricky problem. What do you do with all those coal plants that are supposed to run for another 30 or 40 years? Well, the ETM uses a mix of public and private money to buy those coal plants for the sole purpose of shutting them down early. It's like paying a power plant to retire ahead of schedule.
And they're already putting it to the test. In a pilot project, a group of banks and investors bought a coal plant. By setting up the deal in a smart way, they made it financially possible to schedule its retirement a full 15 years early. And what's really important is that the plan includes support for the workers at the plant and a strategy to reuse the land for something clean, aiming for what they call a just transition.
And they're not stopping there. Now they're exploring what's next, something called transition credits. The idea is to tap into global carbon markets. Basically, a company somewhere else in the world could buy a credit that would directly help pay to shut down a coal plant in the Philippines even faster. It's a cutting-edge way to use the global fight against climate change to accelerate their own transition. It's pretty brilliant.
So when you pull back and look at the whole picture, what do you see? You see this incredible high-wire balancing act. The entire plan is a walk on a tightrope between 2 powerful forces, the absolute need for reliable, affordable energy today, and the urgent existential need to build a clean and resilient future. Every single part of this plan lives in that tension.
So, in the end, it's a massive gamble. The Philippines is trying to manage 2 futures at once. They've got one foot planted firmly on the gas pedal to drive their economy forward, but they've got their eyes fixed on the sun to power their destiny. The real question isn't just about technology or money. It's about whether a nation, right on the front lines of our changing world, can pull off one of the most complex balancing acts in modern history. The whole world is watching, and the answer will define their future for generations.